My name is Maya. I'm in the second grade and I have trouble reading. When I open up a book, some words I can read, some words I can't. I mix up words and sounds sometimes. I would look at pictures and try to read the words that I could read. Other kids were getting done really fast, but I felt like I wasn't learning. And they felt like they were learning, but I didn't feel like I was learning, and I wasn't getting done very fast. I just got really frustrated and I felt like I couldn't do it.
Reading can be really difficult for some kids. We're asking 5- and 6-year-olds to master a complex system of letters and sounds. We know they can do it, but it's not always easy. For young children with reading issues, just opening up a book can be discouraging. And reading in front of the class can be embarrassing. Kids might be trying so hard to sound out each word that the meaning of those words escapes them. If we don't give our children the skills and support that they need, they might come to hate reading or to think that they just can't do it. Fortunately, there are ways to help children find their footing and to understand that they aren't dumb. Their brains just work a little differently. For example, we can show kids how changing just one letter can make a huge difference in how a word sounds and what it means. Just think about pit, pet, pat, pot, and put. That basic awareness, especially of the vowel sounds, can be a big step toward unlocking the mystery of reading. With the right strategies and accommodations, almost every child can become a skilled reader.
I had to read books in the summer every day. I started to read every word that I saw. Now I try to sound it out. Like if I was doing happy, P, and I get the words right. I've been reading road signs and every word I see I try to read.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Tammy.
Good morning, Sheka. Good morning, everybody. How about we are officially on spring break?
We are, and the glow is a little different when it's spring break time. Everybody is relaxed and happy and just ready. Yes, relieved, ready for this much needed break. So thank you all and welcome officially to the R.E.A.L.L Academy. I'm Dr. Sheka Houston, and of course, this is my trustmate partner in education, Principal Tammy Taylor, soon to be Dr. Taylor. And we're continuing our series on reading to make sure that students are able to improve in this area. We have tips for educators as well as parents and anyone who is working with children. Everything that we bring you is based on our framework that we created to provide leaders with a roadmap to cultivate a strong culture and make sure that students are engaged as well as performing.
Definitely. The R.E.A.L.L acronym that we use actually stands for respect, excellence, accountability, literacy, and leadership. And because we focus on literacy, we also use that R.E.A.L.L acronym to define our framework for literacy. And that framework, actually, the acronym stands for something different that relates to what we're doing with respect. Because again, when we enter into those doors, that respect door takes us to everything that we go to. And the next visual that Sheka had up was actually our R.E.A.L.L literacy framework, which is relevant, exciting, accessible lessons learned through reading. So our framework, whether it is for literacy, whether it's just our general framework, or if it's our cultural framework, all of that work is actually based on the philosophies of Ron Edmonds, who was a school turnaround specialist, a school improvement specialist.
And using the strategies that Tammy talked about that we've outlined in our framework in order to make sure that leaders have that roadmap, our schools were able to improve 2 report card grade levels in 1 year at the middle school I work with and all the phenomenal educators who are part of my team, and 3 report card grade levels at Tammy's school with her phenomenal team at the elementary school. We're very passionate about literacy. We've been dubbed the literacy leaders, and that's because we know that literacy touches everything. It really is the key to equity in education. And in 2007, 33% of fourth graders scored below basic in reading. 21 to 23% of adults in the US at that time had the lowest level of literacy. So if we can improve literacy, especially with children in schools, and make sure those experiences are different, we can really change things in the trajectory of children's lives as well as lives of when they become adults.
Absolutely, because it impacts literacy, reading, impacts every aspect of school and how students perform in all areas. Each content area is contingent upon kids being able to successfully read, but it also impacts other areas of life like healthcare. It impacts crime rate. It also impacts the unemployment rate.
Definitely, Tammy. And so, with our pre-show video where we showed Maya, why is it that some students struggle with reading, but it comes easily to others? And there could actually be several reasons, but we want you to know that it's important to know that reading doesn't come as natural as it is to learning to talk. They've created this whole new science of reading that everyone is going through. Our district is doing letters training, and I know that several educators around the state are participating in some type of science of reading training, because what they have found is that science is what's needed to be able to understand how to do that properly. Good morning, Principal Kafele, and everyone joining us. Thank you all for joining us. But I use that video as my a training video with teachers, because a lot of times as teachers, we don't understand sometimes what it feels like to struggle. Now, reading came easily for me. I was one of those students who never got in trouble. I never went to ISS. I never got suspended. Even on senior skip day, I got my teacher to sign me out because I didn't want to get in trouble. So I was one of those people in school. And sometimes for teachers, that's where a lot of teachers come from, that type of background. So to identify with struggling in reading or academics or school period, sometimes that's a stretch for teachers. So I wanted to make sure that they understood what that feels like, hearing it from the child, how it feels to struggle. She talked about how she looked around and saw how kids were getting done faster than her, and that was really frustrating to her. And it makes children feel bad, and we have to really be intentional about building their confidence, because when you're struggling with reading, and it could be over multiple years, a lot of times our students in intervention sometimes remain the same because it's smaller levels of growth. For in some cases it should be more if it's done with fidelity. But you have to make sure that they're experiencing those successes so they can feel good about reading, and it becomes something that they gravitate towards, because you don't gravitate towards things that you are not good at. I used to could do cartwheels when I was 7, but now at 44, I'm not running around doing a whole bunch of cartwheels because I can't, but if I could, I would gravitate towards that. So people don't naturally gravitate towards things that they're not good at. So we have to be intentional about creating those successes for them. And even as parents, sometimes in some of my parent conferences, I've had to very nicely change the messaging, because if a child is sitting there, sometimes the parents would say things like, oh yeah, she or he has always been a poor reader or struggled with reading. And I would just reiterate, but I'm so proud that they have grown since we've been working with them, and they've gone up 2 grade levels, because at that point you would see the child's head just drop, and they would, not be proud of themselves. They would feel like their parents aren't proud of them. So even as parents, we have to be careful about how we're saying that, a child is growing. We want to focus on the positive. Yeah, they may not be on grade level right now, but we're seeing that growth. So it's instituting that growth mindset from home, in the students, in the teachers. All of that is essential to make sure that we're able to grow in reading.
Most definitely, Sheka. One of the things that should come out of us trying to cultivate that growth mindset within our schools is really making sure that teachers understand why it's so important to focus on the growth and not get fixated on whether or not the children are working at grade level or if they are able to master the standardized assessments that come at them or the benchmark. So whatever those things are that are at grade level, but it's more important to focus on the child and how
Mhm.
that child is growing, because when you get children who you like you were just talking about, if you are already in the 8th grade and you're reading at a 1st grade level, you are some grade levels behind. It's
Mhm.
almost unrealistic to think that you're going to go from being at the 1st grade level to being ready for 9th grade.
Mhm.
But when children are growing continuously and you see that this child has gone from being at the 1st grade level to the end of a 5th grade level, that's significant growth and
Definitely.
definitely worthy of being celebrated. It's
Mhm.
also worthy of being rewarded, because those kids need to understand, look, this hard work that I'm putting into this is paying off. Because if the only metric that we provide is that one that measures them against grade level standards or against the standardized test, then the teacher is frustrated and the students get frustrated. And we talked about this before, Shika, and you were talking about why sometimes that shows up because of the biases that we have as educators.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I do address that bias, because sometimes we have those well behaved students who may be very articulate, and then the bias says, oh, well, they don't belong with the struggling reading group. I'm just going to keep them over here with this particular group. But then they don't end up getting the help that they need. So, as educators as well, we have to check our bias. It's not about where we think certain children belong. We have to put them where they're going to get the help that they need.
Absolutely. I love what you just said, Arcella, about the power of yet.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely the place that we really have to stand firm and make sure, as leaders of our schools, that everybody sees the power of yet, even the kids. Like, I mean, you're getting there. Hey,
Right.
we see the effort that you're putting in. You're going to get there. Hey, we got you. This is good stuff that you have going on. So when we are able to encourage kids and to make sure that they recognize, yes, you're growing. And if you stick with me, we're going to get you where you need to be. You just got to you got to have some sustenance, and you got to have that stay with it spirit, so that you can get where you're supposed to be. And one of the things that we really do work on at the elementary school that I'm principal at is building the stamina of kids. And
Mm-hmm.
we try to build that stamina in reading, because it's so important that they don't faint when they get these passages and have to pick them apart and read through them when they get to a standardized test. So stamina in reading is always crucial. But we also try to build their stamina in their persona, because you have to have the confidence to go into this knowing, you know what, I might not get the score that Tammy gets, but I'm going to do the best that I can so that the growth that I have made shows up and we are really able to see exactly what you've done and how that is going to work for you. One
Mm-hmm.
of the other things that Sheka and I had talked about, and this is one of the things that came out of Maya's video, and why we want to encourage you as leaders to be people who encourage your teachers to use those strategies that are going to help those struggling readers so that they don't faint, because nobody really knows how it feels to be a struggling reader unless you were one.
Mm-hmm.
We can't identify with that, and that's what Sheikah's talking about. You know, when you don't really make that kind of connection because you can't connect with it. Reading came naturally. When I went to school, I was able to read. I have been reading, my mom said, since I can't even remember. I think she said like 4 years old. So when you reading comes naturally for you, then that isn't something that you can identify with. So you really have to put yourself in a place where you're willing to do some research on what can I do to make things better for these struggling readers. And one of the things that we've talked about before is just engaging in those strategies that's going to improve them as reading, paying very careful attention to the sounds that letters make, focusing on those vowel sounds. You heard the specialist in that video talking about what we were talking to you guys about last week, and that was segmenting the words and replacing those different vowel sounds to show how you can build a word with the same letters and change that word and what the word means and how the word sounds by just removing and replacing a vowel. So paying attention to those vowels and making sure that that's important, reminding them of how letters and sounds work, but also using environmental print. We've been talking about that for a while. She was so excited because she had learned how to read road signs.
Mm-hmm.
That is so imperative when you help them figure out that, yes, stop says stop. And guess what? It's going to say stop every single time. It's going to say stop if it's on the sign. But guess what? It says stop when it's on this page in this book. So those connections really help kids to begin to build the confidence that they need to develop as readers. Another thing that we wanted to just leave with you is something that's really important, and that is providing students with the opportunity to continuously engage in discourse. Sometimes teachers don't like that. However, you have to help your teachers understand why it's so important. And discourse is so important because oral language is closely connected, it's foundational for reading and for literacy. It's important that you allow students to talk. They have to be able to talk to one another, and engage in meaningful conversations, and not just with you as the principal and not just with the teacher, but with each other. That develops those literacy skills that are based around that oral language and that oral language development. Now, when I was a first grade teacher, I had a conversation center in my classroom, and that was a requirement. Every single day, they had to go to the conversation center. And part of that conversation center was written, because you also have to know how to write and be
Mm-hmm.
able to communicate in writing. But a part of that was also speaking. And we provided them with the opportunity to listen to themselves speak. So they could actually record and listen to themselves, or we had all sorts of devices for them to use as well so that they could hear what they were saying. Now, is that noisy when the principal comes in the classroom? It is. But you know what? That's productive noise, and that's what you want. And you want to be able to support your teachers with that. You have to be willing to allow students to have that opportunity to engage in discourse. And please know, parents, that this does not just begin when kids go to school. And this is why it's so important that you're having conversations with your children. You don't need to, when they're small, talk to them in what we used to consider baby language, because there really honestly is no such thing. You really need to speak to them, so that they are developing a strong vocabulary and that they're learning the nuances of language and how conversations work. They have to understand that in a conversation, somebody's listening, somebody's speaking. That helps them to be respectful conversationalists. So I'm not talking when you're talking. You're talking, I'm talking. Neither one of us know what each other are saying because we haven't practiced good conversation skills. And that's something that I think is tremendously important for our kids.
Definitely, Tammy. And that was one thing that I would do with both of my daughters, have those full conversations. Even as babies, they didn't know what I was saying, but that I knew that that oral language was being developed as I was talking to them, while they were just sitting on the bed. But our oral language development is the foundation for reading. And this is why we should also read books out loud and use advanced vocabulary every chance that we get a chance to.
Absolutely. And I saw, I think Josh said that teachers, he reminds his teachers that kids need to have those shoulder
Hmm.
partner conversations and to engage in turn and talk and allow kids that opportunity to engage in that discourse, because again, it solidifies for the kids exactly what it is, that you're, if especially if you're getting them to turn and talk about what you're teaching, that
Hmm.
helps them to process it at a deeper level. And we just have to be real about it. The two biggest groups that suffer from learning to read with in a fluent manner are our ELL children
Hmm.
and kids that come from poverty. So we have to be especially mindful that we have to put these strategies in place for those kids.
Exactly. And there's different things that you could do. Tammy talked about the conversation center, as one of your centers in your room. The students might come up to your desk to read or to your table to read. You can engage in conversation with them about different things depending on the level. What does your house look like? What type of chores are you responsible for as the teacher? And then as parents, your conversations, and this is what I do when I pick my daughters up, shouldn't just be, hey girls, how was school today? Because what they're always going to say is good. And then that's going to be the end of the conversation. And there's not going to be any real true discourse. Tammy, can you go through the click the comments?
I can.
Um, and so what I always say is, tell me what you learned instead. Tell me what you learned in math or science or reading, so that they can tell me what they learned. And I say, oh, let's remember, we're going to talk in complete sentences. I make sure that they're practicing those speaking skills or those oral skills that I know is going to help their language and their literacy. And I also intentionally use different vocabulary to make sure it's stretching them as well. So if they're asking me, what does that mean, mommy? I can explain it. Well, this is what that means, because building that vocabulary is something that is very important as well. And why is it important? Because oral language skills provide the foundation for word reading and comprehension. So this is the heart of listening and reading comprehension, and they both serve as predictors later of how well students are going to accomplish those literacy and reading skills.
And I know we're about to get out of the way so that we could log on and hear from Principal Kafele this morning. But it is important too to make sure that we, as parents, are teaching our students and our children that we operate under different registries. When you
Mm-hmm.
go to school, you are operating under a formal register of speaking, versus at home you have a more casual register. So when you are informally talking at home, there's a different expectation at school oftentimes. So we want to make sure that that is clear. Sheka, did you have anything else before we close out? Just want to say thank
No.
you guys for joining us.
Yeah,
And
thank you for joining us. Happy spring break.
happy spring break. And please be sure to follow us on all our social media platforms and stay tuned. We'll be back next week.
Thank you, guys. Join us on Principal Kafele's broadcast. And he's not on his page anymore, his personal page. You have to go to the virtual AP Leadership Academy. So we will see you there. Thank you.
Thank you.